Thank you for joining us. My name is Ben Munson, and I'm a Senior Technology Specialist with FarmQA. Today, I'll be talking to you about how you can gain a competitive edge using FarmQA software. So this webinar will be really focused on when you look at your business, whether it be retail or co-op, we see a trend in more online sales. We want to talk to you about how you can increase your service offering through using a tool like ours that enables your agronomists to do those services. So with that said, where we're focused and what's the pain point we're trying to fix. When you look at a survey in 2022 done by CropLife, they call out that 46% of all the respondents to the survey indicated that labor was the #1 issue for them at a retail location. That was a drastic increase from 30% in 2022. And so what we do and what's our story or piece in this puzzle, we help the agronomists that are on your staff do more. And that is done through being efficient with our tools and our software to help them do more for a larger grower audience. So what does that actually look like? It's through things like crop scouting, treatment recommendations, soil sampling, imagery analytics, and the tools around that to provide information to the grower when it comes to the reporting of their scouting, treatment recommendations, so that they can make more informed decisions, and then ultimately perhaps buy more product from you through that service offering. So what we'll be talking about specifically today and what functionality we have to offer, it would be things like crop plans. So in the spring or let's say late fall, when you're sitting down with a producer, walking through what to purchase for seed buying decisions, we can do that within FarmQA. We help the agronomists do crop scouting and generating reports for producers to look at weekly, daily, whatever cadence you're out in that field. With that scouting report, if there is an issue, you can write treatment recommendations within our mobile application. Then if you're offering soil sampling or looking at offering soil sampling, you can use FarmQA to do that and write variable rate prescriptions based on that information. So with that, hopefully you can gain confidence in using our tool to offer services such as this. But then in addition, you can do that efficiently. So through task management as a manager, you can define who should scout where, who should soil sample. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can get a breakdown from a map view of what's been collected, what needs to be collected in the future. Then once that's inputted into the system, you can easily transfer that data to the grower for transparency. You can also help let's say your truck drivers, if you're doing custom application, navigate to fields. They can work off an interactive map on a mobile application, which is restricted just down to the growers or producers they need to see. And then finally, you could also print field maps if that's a preferred method for communication to the drivers. Finally, data sharing. So we exist to have the data come into our digital file cabinet, if you will, and then allow growers to easily access that, not only in real time, but across seasons. And so we do that through a branded grower portal. So if you are a retailer, you can take our software platform, put your logo on it, your colors, and then when the growers log in, it looks like you developed the program. With that, you can also export our data to things like PDFs, shape files, Excel, CSV files, so that the data is exportable if the growers prefer to consume it in that way. And then as I mentioned, we also have the historic log. So not only looking at year by year, but also, let's say the last 10 years, 15 years, looking at what chemistry was sprayed in the fields or fertility records over lab data that's been captured. So that's what we'll be talking about today and breaking into those 3 sections. And ultimately, we'll talk through a couple of use cases for our current customers. With that, I'll jump into our software product. We have a web platform, which allows you to manage your field boundaries, set up your organizational structure. So that would be your grower farm field tree. What this allows you to do at this point is get a breakdown color-coded by crop. As you can see in the bottom right, this legend shows what crops are planted, number of fields, number of acres. Within here, you can do things like jump between growing seasons. You can filter your data down based on a particular unit of your operation. In my case, I've broken down my demo data into Minnesota farms and North Dakota farms. If I select any one of those, the data filters down. Within here, you have the option to overlay some information. So you can see things like your township section lines overlaid in your operation, bring in a weather radar. You can also toggle between your coloring schemes. So if you'd rather look at your fields based on varieties, you could then search this on corn and see different shades of yellow representing your varieties. All this is customizable as far as your variety list, your color patterns and schemes, and then also your organizational units, as I mentioned, which is also a third coloring option here, which allows you to see a unique color per your grower or division in your operation. So it's a way to, again, have an interactive map, which you can set up to match the needs of your operation. Now, in addition to that, we can also overlay information. So things like moisture probes, weather station data, field entrances. If you're wanting to use this to navigate for your drivers, you can not only have them get turn-by-turn directions to fields on a mobile application, but more specifically to a field entrance within that field. We also allow you to overlay things like where you scouted. So you have scouting pins within fields, soil sampling points can be defined, and then within any given field, you can zoom in, click on that field to get some details, as you can see on the left-hand side. So this will tell you who owns the field, field name, some additional details broken down about it. You can edit the boundaries, input plant dates, harvested dates, but then you start to see information on that field. So things like your season GDUs, your weather precipitation, current conditions, forecast, and then some roll-up data across that field as well. Then more specifically, you can get into previous years to jump back and see things like our event logs. And so you could look back on a particular field like this in 2021, and you could see exactly what was sprayed, when it was planted, harvested, and you could click in to get detailed reports on any one of those events, or you could generate a roll-up report as well. When talking about soil sampling, we just jumped back into 2021, and so within this year at the field level, you can do things like see lab results per sampling location, or you can drill in to see that data over time. So if I use the left-hand pane, that's an average of the field as far as the number you're seeing here. And then you could also see that field average, but across time. So this could either be broken down by 2-week tissue sample intervals or by year. So this is a backfill tool for the soil data and something that we can capture within FarmQA. So that's just a few basics about what can be seen in the data captured at a field level. We'll now jump in and talk about some service offerings and how you can do those specific things within our tool. We talked about crop plans. One way you can do that is through looking at a rotation tool. So within this particular view, you can turn seasons on and off. So perhaps you just want to look at the last few years, maybe 3 years within the system. And then you can look at a futuristic season or a plan 2023. So what I've done in this case is I've broken down for a particular grower. You can see what's been planted over the last, I guess this is 4 years, and then you can start to assign what should be planted in that futuristic year of 2023. With this, you can see the acreage per field, but also the total acres in each of those crops. So in this case, in 2021, as you can see on the top right-hand side, I had 671 acres of spring wheat. Now I could export this out once you do a crop plan. And then this is something that the grower could get emailed, texted out, which will break down the same information that you see in this interactive view, but it would be in Excel or CSV. You can also break this same view down into a varietal view. So if you're looking at what varieties got planted, you could do that same sort of grouping, but do it based on your varieties, and then the acreage total will be based on those as well. So this is where you can get into seed selection, looking at variety, but also the acreage totals help you get to a number of units of seed are needed to fulfill your plan. Next, we talked about crop scouting. So we'll jump over to the mobile application to talk through that offering. So within FarmQA, we allow you to draw your fields, upload your fields. But once that's done, an agronomist can use the mobile application to scout fields. Now, I know scouting can be a term in the industry where maybe you're a sales agronomist and you don't have the time to scout in detail. The beauty of our system is that you can customize your forms for when you scout to be either very detailed, if that's kind of your offering, or very simplified. And what we've seen from our customer base is they've used our tool to just show and prove to the customers that they are getting into the fields, they're assessing what's going on, and it's not necessarily about the complexity of the report. It's about showing the presence with a picture and a comment about what you saw. So what I've done here is I've clicked on the field and I get a menu pane breaking down my options. Adding observations would allow us to scout. You can write treatment recommendations, and you can drop pins for things like insect traps, scouting locations, maybe you found a problem area, or you just want to mark a tile inlet. You can do that through the marker tool, but we'll first start out talking about scouting. So I will add an observation. This is a customizable form, meaning that the questions and the sections that you see within here, I've built out within the software. So this is where I'm talking about if you want just a simple method of saying overall field looks good and consider spraying in the next 2 weeks. You can make a note such as that. You can draw on the map and you can take pictures. And so in my case, I'll take a picture, but I could also attach from the photo library. And this will be associated to this PDF report along with my map notation. So if I wanted to designate, let's say, an area where you had wild oats or you had a particular rust issue, you could mark that out through any of our draw tools, and that will also get pushed to the PDF report that the grower sees. So from a simplistic standpoint, you could submit this. You can do these in batches. So if you just checked 10 canola fields, you could multi-select fields, generate one report, and push that to the grower as well. If you prefer more of an in-depth scouting trip, you could do things like we have calculated questions, helping you do corn yield estimates based on populations and kernel counts. Or you can get into details looking at crop health and marking growth stages. And then within here, we've got things where you could do multiple numeric assessments, and then we'll generate the min-max average across that. Or you could do things looking at disease issues, insects, weeds, etc. So with that, that would be our scouting module. But then on top of that, if you did see an issue, you could immediately write a treatment recommendation. Within here, you have a single field, but again, going back to being efficient, you could multi-select by either searching corn from a list view or doing the same thing from your map view, and then choosing which fields should get that application. Once that's done, you can then choose your mixes. So you can have a customized list of products and prices in FarmQA, and then combine those into products. So within here, I've got a combination of chemical products that I'll choose. That then populates with the mix order, the rates. But even though this is a default, I can still adjust this. So if I wanted to come up or down with my rates from the mobile application, I could key that in. I could view the product label. So as a agronomist, let's say the grower had a question, they called me up, I could immediately pull up the label on the phone and read through whatever, maybe it's a PPE question. You could see that here. We also pull out and look at the EPA numbers, your harvest intervals, rainfast, etc. Once that's done, we can see you populated based on some default information, your spray volumes, rainfast, etc. You can put in priorities and then spray windows as well. Once that's done, you can submit those reports. It gets pushed back into our web view, but it's also available on the app. And so from here, you could immediately text out this report or a set of reports. So let's say I wanted to multi-select all the reports I did for Munson Farms. I could then push that into a PDF and customize some of the details I see with that. The data will also be available back in the web view. You can view that as either the combined report. So in my case, I'll show you what I did in my example with the scouting report and the treatment recommendation. You can send or text a report to a grower. They can immediately see that you were in the field. You can see where in the field you were. You break down the treatment recommendation with your rates, your product totals based on the field size. And then at the very bottom, they also see the pictures. Let's say you're taking a picture of a corn crop and a particular disease issue, that's going to show up for that producer. So it's a tangible report that the grower gets on their phone, real time, when you're out there checking. And again, that just shows the value of your service. In addition to that, when it comes to products, we mentioned the roll-up of the recommendations and how you can write those in batches. You could also combine those. Let's say you did a batch recommendation for soybeans and corn and canola. You can then push that all into a single PDF that's condensed for that grower with rolled up product totals. And so you can send a report looking similar to this, where I had 3 fields, the product total shown down here. And let's say these are my corn recommendations. This is another corn recommendation, but perhaps different rates. And then at the bottom here, a third recommendation with what I call the shopping cart at the very bottom. So it's going to roll up the totals across all 3 of those different recommendations, but still giving you the amount of product that needs to either be purchased or applied. So those are some of the things that we can do in the program. We can also help you soil sample. And so we allow you to do a couple different methods of sampling. So if you have, let's say, existing zones, you can bring those zone maps into FarmQA, see them on the mobile application, allow your collector to navigate throughout the zones, drop pins. So this would be an example where you've got defined pins where you want a collector to go. And then as they collect, they can be scanning barcodes and submitting the data back to labs. You can also do grid sampling. And so what that looks like is on the mobile application. If I jump over to my iPad, this is where you can generate a grid. So you can define a grid within our software. And then from there, you can scan barcodes at each location. So I'll click on a grid sampling. This is a work item or task that you've told somebody to go collect points. You can see the grid being defined on the application. You could then zoom in on your start point. You can navigate the map. So if you wanted to go east to west, you could actually have that be vertical so that as you're driving, it would be logical to see where that next point is. But then once you actually click within a sampling point, it will use your GPS location and detect where you are, which then allows you to scan a barcode. So it says confirm that this is the barcode number. And then that point goes from having that asterisk to actually being collected, where that goes away. So it allows you to go through the flow of collection. And then once they're done, they can click the check mark button to show that they're done with that field. So that's the sampling front, and then we'll talk through uploading that data. But that's how we can help you as a soil sampling service to growers, seeing these pins either in grids, composites, zones, and then helping on the collection and the importing of data as well. So once that's done, you can bring lab results in from a lab via CSV import. We're also working through direct connections with certain labs. And in the end, you'd get to a view similar to this, where you'd have the points that were collected displayed in the window. The table, you can break the data down where you're seeing by location what the lab results were. These can be sorted and filtered. You could also pivot this data to look at the nutrients by rows. But then from this view, you can also get some general information, like looking at what your recommendation history was in this field for fertility products, or looking at your average yield or the average yield you got in this field versus the other fields in your operation. You can also start to average that data across the field and get some summarized information. But from this view, you can also generate the variable rate zones. And so once I get into the create management zone view, I can give this a name. So we'll say webinar example. You can give it an optional description, choose which nutrient you want to be looking at. So let's say we're looking at K. You can choose labels, select your clustering algorithm. We've got that documented, but there's also a little text kind of breaking down the different modes. Set a minimum polygon size, color ramp, and then you can actually generate those zones, which will generate the zones. If I were to save this, it would generate a zone, which I could then write prescriptions based on. I can save this as a profile, so if I want to reuse these zones or the setup as far as the minimum zone size and the color ramps, that's then remembered in our system. If I save that, that will now be a zone in the program, which we can write prescriptions based out of, which export to shapefile. So that's the kind of the service side of soil sampling. Let's get into kind of the management of how you can manage your team that are doing these services. So that kind of walk through the offerings, but now think about from a perspective of a manager. If you have a large team that you're managing and people are ordering services, what you can do within FarmQA is come to a particular list view like this or the map. And let's say you have a couple sugar beet fields that need to be either scouted or soil sampled. You could multi-select those in a list view. And while you're here, you could look at things like when it was planted, when it was last scouted, how many events it has on it. So you could see, the previous treatment applications and the scouting events. But then you can schedule task. So within here, you could say, I'm going to schedule a scouting task, and you could assign a date, a priority level, and who it should be assigned to. And then they then get a task which shows up on their mobile application, similar to how I showed our soil sampling workflow. They would then get a series of tasks which they could navigate to the fields. So jump in and actually navigate to a field. And the way that works is if they were on the mobile application and let's say they clicked on a field, they can see the route to button or the big navigation button over here. And if they clicked on that, it would pull them into Google Maps and it would use a location to actually give them turn-by-turn directions to that field entrance. And so as a team, you could be managing, sending work orders, but then their view is very stripped down to just what they need to do for a particular period of time. And that can be used from an agronomist perspective, maybe a custom applicator, or it could be, whatever tools you want to use this for, or whatever personnel, I should say. So that's kind of the workflow of this data. Now, the other thing we have is if you want to use this as a data sharing mechanism. So within FarmQA, you've got information from sampling labs, your scouting reports, you've got weather data, maybe it's precipitation, GDUs, and their treatment applications. That data is then available to the grower. And so they can be given an access or a login key to the system. Once they're in the program, they can be seeing the data I was showing previously, things like their event logs, their maps, all the record history within here as well. The way this works is we allow you to assign users to any one of your branches or nodes within the program. So you can add users, so emails, first name, last name, password. They associate a role within FarmQA. Are you an admin? Are you an agronomist? Or are you a grower or simply a viewer? So we restrict what you can do, but then you can also restrict what access or branch within the system you should be able to use it. So let's say they're just at Minnesota Farms. If I were to save this, that person would then have a login with that role at that organizational level. The beauty of all this is that it could then be used as a white labeled grower portal. So this is an example of the same software tool, but we've put an example brand around it where you can see you could upload your own images, your own color schemes, so that as a grower, when they logged in to see the data within your retail location, they could see their data represented here, restricted down to just their farm. But it looks like, again, the you as a retailer developed the program internally. So that's kind of a vision we have. And where we allow you to go further than just capturing data is within the analytics. And so this would be things like uploading your lab results, but then seeing it over time. So you can start to create these views to have conversations with growers looking at their fertility trends. Maybe their potassium levels are coming back, relatively normal, but you can see a gradual decline every year. So they're consuming more than what they're putting down. Or you're looking at maybe a nitrogen map. In the center screen here, you can see what we call a field average map. And I've done this for nitrogen over time. So as I play this, green is going to represent a deficient or a lower nitrogen value or a sample test on the field. Green means sufficient. So you can see through the years which ones have been have additional applications, where that nitrogen is being consumed across that field. And so there's views like this where we allow you to roll up that data across different data types and do comparisons across, let's say, yields by GDUs or by nutrient levels. And so that's where we have gone with the program, and hopefully it adds value to the grower and helps agronomists make decisions for those growers. So with that, that's kind of our vision, is helping you do those services. So things like sampling, scouting, treatment recommendations, allowing you to do that, manage your team through the task tool and the map, interactive map views. Once those agronomists or drivers get that task, they can navigate, they can see the field boundaries, they can do those tasks. And then the growers are involved as well with either the exported PDFs, or it could be them logging in directly if they have an appetite for seeing that digitally represented. And then the final goal is that you then have an increased service offering, which entices the grower to continue to do business with you because of the data that exists within the tool. So with that, we've got an existing set of customers that are doing just that. An example, Belgrade Co-op in Minnesota, they are using our system, and their kind of key takeaways with this was around managing custom applicators, delivery drivers, and it was, you're no longer getting those phone calls saying, where is Jim's field or Holmes Quarter? It's pulling up an interactive map, the navigation versus where their current GPS is, and they're eliminating all that kind of frustration with navigation. They're also using us for sample collection, scouting tools, and so it's a service offering provided through our product, through our software, which betters their business. And so that's kind of the goal, the vision we're going after here with this tool. And we'd love to talk to you about that. So you can start a demo on our website, so FarmQA.com, start a 14-day free trial. Otherwise, I provide kind of one-on-one demos if you want me to walk through your specific example. Something that we do very frequently is upload any existing data that you may have already. So we can bring in things like shape files with your field boundaries, upload existing zone maps or sampling points. You can have a customized product list with pricing in it, or maybe even a variety list. And so we can very easily and quickly customize a trial account for you and showcase how you could use this tool for your operation. So with that, thanks for joining in. Please reach out to my contact information below with any questions. Thank you.